I'm Cora. Welcome back to Crimes Across Borders. Today's case is very recent and still ongoing, so this video won't be super long. But honestly, as soon as I heard about it, I couldn't stop thinking about it. We are talking about Beth Martin, a young British woman who fell ill during a flight to Turkey and died shortly after landing. What happened next has left her family and a lot of people online with more questions than answers. There are some strange similarities here to the Magdalena Żuk case, which I covered a while back. Was another young woman who died suddenly while abroad, surrounded by conflicting accounts and very few clear explanations. Now, I'm not saying these cases are directly connected or anything, but something about the missing information, the gaps, the silence, it just feels all too familiar and so unsettling. So today, let's walk through what we know so far about Beth Martin's death and why so many people are wondering what really happened. Here's what we know so far, and I will warn you, it is upsetting. On Sunday, April 27th, 2025, Beth Martin, a 28-year-old mom of two from the UK, flew to Istanbul, Turkey with her husband Luke and their two young children. It was meant to be a proper, much-needed family holiday. There isn't a lot of detailed public information about Beth, but from what I've seen in the comments online and on social media, she was clearly deeply loved. People describe her as a wonderful mom, a kind friend, and a devoted wife. And honestly, you can see it in her photos. She just radiates happiness. And with two small children, that holiday was for sure well deserved. Their official GoFundMe page says Beth started feeling unwell on arrival in Istanbul, but her friend said in a video that Beth started feeling bad already on the plane and that they were thinking maybe it was food poisoning as they had a takeaway the night before. I'm not sure which is more accurate. Perhaps she truly started feeling bad just when they arrived, still on the plane, but towards the end of their journey. In any case, they got to the hotel. She was unwell, but managed to get some sleep. I think at this point, they were just probably hoping it's a stomach bug or bad food, and it will pass on its own. Unfortunately, the next day, she was not better. She was not better at all. She was actually worse. And her husband, Luke, said she was delirious at this point. Luke tried calling hospitals and doctors, but was told no one can come earlier than 10 a.m. And eventually, he managed to get an ambulance. Beth was taken to the hospital, and Luke followed with the kids in a taxi. Once Beth arrived in the hospital, things quickly became overwhelming and honestly, I guess, quite traumatic. She was confused, scared, and clearly deteriorating. But there was no proper communication. Luke didn't speak the language, and the staff weren't explaining what was happening at all. Their two young children were watching as their mom was poked, restrained, and treated by strangers. No clarity, no compassion, just chaos. And very early on, Luke was told he couldn't stay with Beth at all. And with the kids to look after and no one else there to help, he had no choice but to go back to the hotel with the children. The family mentions on their GoFundMe that there was a kind woman the family had met on a plane who offered to stay at the hospital with Beth, just to make sure she wasn't alone. Again, this might seem a little bit suspicious too. There are already some conspiracies regarding this woman or a man, because I have heard both versions. I haven't found any more information about this person, and it's not really mentioned by anyone else after. I do understand it might be a little bit suspicious that someone they just met on a plane is kind enough to spend their holiday time at the hospital looking after a complete stranger, especially that technically no one was actually allowed to be with Beth, so it was just kind of sitting at the corridor anyway. But yes, as I said, it is kind, it is suspicious. I only chose to mention it because it is mentioned on their official GoFundMe page, so I find that this information is, somewhat trustworthy. At least in the meaning of it did happen. But yes, I don't know what to think about it. If it's something we can completely ignore, or if it's something that later on will come to have some meaning. I guess we will see. That night, Beth was moved into intensive care. Of course, Luke still was not allowed to see her. And despite the hospital constantly, he got no updates, no information, nothing. The only time someone did call him, it was to ask him to come and pay upfront for some tests and for a scan. And from what we know, Beth was then moved to another hospital, had several tests done because they said there was something wrong with her heart. They did an angiogram, and then the doctor said to Luke that nothing concerning had shown up. Definitely no issues with her heart, which is very important to note. After this, Luke didn't even know she's been moved back to the first hospital. He only found out when his mother-in-law arrived at the hospital, started asking around. She wanted to see her daughter, and they were looking for Beth at the new hospital. No one had told them that she wasn't even there anymore because they actually transferred her in the middle of the night. Like, they didn't inform anyone. When they finally got to the right hospital, Beth's friend Ellie said they were told they will be able to see her in just 5 minutes. And then it was 10 more minutes. And then another and another. And in the end, it lasted hours. Meanwhile, Luke was being interrogated by Turkish police. And from what we know, he didn't even have a translator at this point. He was pressured into signing a document that he couldn't understand. It wasn't until a bit later when somehow he managed to translate this document and he realized what it actually said. Beth had died at 9 in the morning. Can you imagine just reading that from a piece of paper? That was the first time he found out an information like this, that his wife might be dead, from a piece of paper. And even then, he wasn't sure if it was real, because at the same time, Beth's family was still at the hospital being told they will be able to see her in 5 minutes. So there was that hope that that was just a mistake, some misunderstanding. Obviously, the family's there in the hospital. If she died, they would tell them. Even if they wouldn't call him, they would tell them. So this just probably felt like, I don't know, like a dream, a nightmare, actually. But then Beth's mom was handed her daughter's belongings, including her wedding ring. Again, no explanation, no confirmation, nothing, just that. And if that wasn't bad enough, suddenly Luke was actually being accused of poisoning his own wife. Which, okay, do your investigation, ask the hard questions, but at the very least, get the man a translator and let him know what is happening. Eventually, Beth's mom was finally allowed in to see her. Only for 1 minute before being asked to leave again. She said that Beth was on life support at this point, really cold and looked barely alive. There was no interaction with her, no response, just this, overwhelming feeling that something was terribly wrong. But at least they knew that technically she is alive. And then came another moment that makes absolutely no sense. A doctor at the hospital asked if Beth had any allergies, which Luke had already told the paramedics when she first got into the ambulance. He made clear multiple times she was allergic to penicillin. But When he repeated it at the hospital, they were shocked. They had no idea. They'd been treating her for hours at this point without knowing that. Apparently, no one had passed the information. And later on that evening, the hospital called Luke, and this time it was final. Beth had passed away. And what makes it even more devastating is that just shortly before that call, the insurance company had contacted Luke and the hospital finally confirming that they secured a private hospital for Beth. So they were able to transfer her in a few hours, which, who knows, maybe it would actually change the outcome of the story, or at least make it a little bit less traumatic for everyone involved. Luke had been pushing for it since the beginning. He spent days fighting to get her moved. But by the time it was approved, it was too late. Beth was already gone. And as things weren't already devastating enough, the family was suddenly told that Beth was going to be buried the following evening. Just like this, they decided. Of course, they objected. They wanted to bring Beth to the UK. That was never even a question for them. Once again, all they got in response was more issues, more delays, and more money. Always more money. Pay up front, pay more, or wait, and then pay more and most likely still wait. Then the next day, Wednesday the 30th, Luke was told to be at the hospital at 8 in the morning to speak with the prosecutor. At this point, he still hadn't been allowed to see his wife, not even after her death. And instead of meeting in like an office or a proper interview room, he spent his day being questioned by a police in the back of the van in a hospital car park. Can you even imagine how terrifying that must have been? You're in a foreign country. You don't speak the language. They don't speak your language. You don't fully understand the legal system or the culture. Your wife has just died under confusing, unexplained circumstances. And now you're being accused of poisoning her as well. There are armed officers standing around you. Your children are waiting back at the hotel. Your mind is just racing. What happens to the kids if I get arrested? They've already lost their mom, and now you might be taken away too. Honestly, I can't even begin to imagine how that felt for Luke, for the entire family. Luke was finally cleared and even allowed to see Beth for like 1 minute. Beth's mom was also allowed to see her too, maybe a little longer, but throughout, the hospital staff were extremely strict. They made sure she washed her hands, didn't touch anything, and forbade her from any hugs or kisses. Like, they were more worried about all the rules than some basic compassion. And actually, to make matters worse, when Luke tried to see his wife's body in the morgue, the hospital staff seemed more concerned with money and legal risks than basic compassion. Before they let him in, they kept pressing him with questions like, are you going to sue? Are you planning to take legal action? We need to know. Tell us, are you going to sue? He was just trying to grieve, to say goodbye to his wife. All they wanted to know is, are you going to sue? So, of course, he asked, why would I sue? Did you do something that I need to sue for? That just seemed so out there. But again, all they cared about was getting their bill paid and knowing if he's going to sue. Not the fact that a young woman had just died. Not the trauma her family was living through, just money and damage control. As if that wasn't enough, they were told to carry Bev's body themselves in a zipped body bag through the hospital corridors. When I read that the first time, I had to reread it again, and then I found the video from Beth's and Luke's friend who was there, and she was talking about it. And I was watching it thinking, like, I need to rewatch it. I misunderstood something. That cannot be right. That's not what she meant. But yes, they were told to just pick up the corners of the body bag, put it in some type of a coffin, and then take it by themselves throughout the hospital, through all the corridors, where there are other people. It wasn't empty. There were other people that were there for multiple different reasons. People laughing, passing them, just tapping on the coffin, not being aware what that family is going through. And again, that must have been so hard for them. And it's so weird as well. I did hear that apparently it's a custom in Turkey that it's the family who escorts the body, but it just still seems so wrong that they had to do it this way in that corridor. And then they were waiting for hours in that corridor before they were allowed to transport her further. So they actually had to stay there among everyone else in the middle of a corridor. That does not seem normal. That doesn't seem any more like a custom, like a tradition. It just seems so wrong. So wrong. Especially that no one bothered to explain to them, like, this is how it's done here. I mean, at least if they said something, this is how it looks here, there's nothing else we can do for you, but we're sorry about that. Maybe at least the family would feel a little bit better. I know it wouldn't change much, but I don't know. A lot of the times when things are explained and clearly communicated, people feel much, much different about it. And when it just kind of happens, that's another story. And even for the hospital, they should care about it, because the families are more likely to sue when they feel this way. And if things are explained to them with a little bit more compassion and just clear information, what is going to happen next and so on, they're less likely to complain about it, because they understand that's how it's done here, but at least they know. So all of this just does not make sense to me and to a lot of other people as well. And again, just when it seemed like things couldn't get any worse, they did. Once Beth was back in the UK, her family requested a second autopsy, and that's when they were told that Beth's heart was missing. Like, seriously. According to the Turkish Ministry of Health, Beth Martin died from cardiac arrest caused by multiple organ failure, but they haven't explained what actually triggered it. And a preliminary autopsy done at the hospital confirmed that no surgical procedures were performed and her organs were left intact. Because Beth's family suspected possible poisoning from something she ate before the trip, her case was treated as a forensic investigation from the start, and there was a second autopsy done in Istanbul before she was released to the family for transport. And despite all of that, the real cause of her death is still a mystery. In one of her videos, Beth's friend Ellie says they were told it wasn't food poisoning and that the full results from the second autopsy done in Istanbul could take up to 6 months. And the autopsy back in the UK will likely take just as long. They still don't have a confirmation or information why Beth's heart is missing and where is it. Obviously, it didn't just disappear on its own. It's hard to believe that it's hard to believe that it could have disappeared in the UK during the British autopsy. It's more likely that it happened before she was released to the family, before they transported her to the UK. But yeah, again, the official statements from the Turkish Ministry of Health is that there was no surgical incisions done on Beth. That's it. So the family friend Ellie, she also shares that doctors told them Beth had received 45 minutes of CPR. But Ellie says that she struggles to believe that because when they saw Beth's body, her appearance was oddly pristine. Her hair was still neatly done in French braids, and anyone who knows how physically intense CPR is, I mean, especially for that long, 45 minutes, it's hard to imagine someone coming out of it looking untouched. And at different times, the family was also told Beth had toxic hepatitis, then septic shock, and then apparently neither. None of it adds up. Whatever really happened to Beth Martin in those final days remains unclear. A healthy, vibrant woman goes on short holiday and within days she's gone. Her family is left grieving, confused, and facing a wall of just vague answers and changing stories. And because of that, because of the silence, the contradictions, it's no surprise that theories have started to spread. Some people believe Beth may have been the victim of medical negligence. Others wonder if there was something more deliberate behind it. One theory that keeps coming up, especially online, is the possibility of organ trafficking. And yeah, it sounds like something out of a movie, but when a family is told their loved one died of multiple organ failure and then the body is returned without a heart, with no clear explanation, no reason, nothing, people are going to ask questions, and rightfully so. Because honestly, I am not surprised that people's minds go there. There are so many stories out there, some verified, some just whispers, about tourists going to Turkey and ending up in situations where something feels off. We've all heard the stories, the urban legends and headlines. Someone goes for a surgery or even just for holidays and comes back missing a kidney. I know it sounds dramatic, but when you combine that with Beth's missing heart, the rushed and confusing hospital transfers, the fact that they were not allowed to see her, the lack of answers, of course, people are going to ask those questions. It doesn't mean it did happen, but it does mean that people are picking up on some type of a pattern. Turkish officials insist Beth's organs were intact, but the lack of transparency and no other explanation for them only fuels suspicion. Beth's loved ones aren't chasing conspiracy theories, they're just trying to understand what happened. And the fact that they were asked repeatedly whether they planned to sue before they were allowed to see her body, that's the kind of detail that stays with you. And at the end of the day, whether it was a tragic medical failure or a chain of miscommunications or something more sinister, Beth's story leaves us with more questions than answers. A young woman goes on holiday and within days she's gone, her heart missing, her family blindsided, and no one is taking real responsibility. Luke's and Beth's family are still waiting for full autopsy results. They're still trying to understand what really happened, and in the meantime, they're left grieving in a foreign system that seemed more focused on silence and bills than on truth or compassion. Whatever you believe about this case, accident, neglect, or something darker, one thing is clear. Beth Martin deserved better. Her family deserved better. And the least we can do is keep asking the questions that still haven't been answered. Let me know what you think in the comments. Have you heard of similar cases? Do you think we will ever get the full story? There's still a lot we don't know, and with the British inquest coming up, plus the results of the Turkish autopsy still to be released, I will definitely be covering any major updates. So if you want to stay up to date as the case develops, feel free to subscribe. Thanks for watching. Take care of yourselves and each other, and see you in the next video. Bye.